When you think of Cheela, the first few things that come to your mind are either moong dal, green gram, which is whole moong, besan or chane ki dal. Today's recipe uses a very unusual ingredient for making a Cheela, and that is Bajra. Let's begin with Bajre ka Cheela. For the Bajre ka Cheela, the first ingredient, of course, is Bajra flour. Now, Bajra is also known as pearl millet. Well, to my knowledge, pearl millet is from prehistoric times, grown in Africa and the Indian subcontinent. Let's begin with the flour. This recipe actually is so nostalgic because it takes me back many years. When I was writing a book on millets, mindful eating, several years back, this was one of the recipes in the cookbook, but eventually it got knocked out because we had to choose the best 50 for the cookbook. So this recipe just had to be there. Let's add in paste of ginger, garlic and green chilies. Well, you can also add in chopped green chilies at this stage, extremely finely chopped, but it could surprise someone while eating, so I just generally avoid all of that. Let's add in ajwain, carom seeds, untoasted. Along with this, just a touch of red chilli powder. This is not just for color, but also for that little zest, that little zing that red chilli brings to a recipe. Untoasted sesame seeds. I'm going to keep a little few aside because while I'm pan frying them, I just like adding a little on top so that they just look nice and crusted. They look just beautiful. Let's add in dahi or curd. Well, the whole idea of adding curd to this recipe is to bring in softness in the dough or the batter. Well, the whole confusion between the dough and the batter is very simple, very clear. Dough is generally rounded and has a little bit of a shape. Batter is generally light, it's liquidy, it's runny. Now, the degree of thinness or the texture, the consistency depends on what you're using the batter for. If it's a dipping batter, it's lighter or it's thinner. If it's a batter that directly goes on a pan like a pancake or a Cheela, it's denser, it's thicker. But you have to aerate that as well. Now, aeration happens either by addition of baking soda or baking powder, a little bit of yeast in some cases, soda in some cases. Choice is completely yours. Depends on which recipe you're making or which recipe you're putting to use. To this, let's add in freshly crushed coriander seeds. Well, this adds in that bite and that flavor punch. Along with this, baking soda. Well, at this stage, you could also add in fruit salt. In case you're adding fruit salt, avoid the soda or baking powder of any kind. Next is salt of Zakanda. Let's add this. Well, in case you're wondering what this is, go and scroll the previous videos. Well, there's nothing called salt of Zakanda. Let's add in regular table salt. One note of caution while making any recipe with Bajra flour, always ensure you pick the freshest of Bajra flour. In case you have a mill around, pick the flour from the mill because then Bajra flour has that little bit of an aftertaste which could tend to get slightly bitter. Remember this. Let's keep this aside. Beginning with the quintessential fresh methi leaves. Watch this, pick this and cut this nice and fine. After the mint leaves, let's move on to fresh garlic as well. While this is in season, ensure you make the best use of this. Let's cut this nice and fine as well. Let's add the fenugreek as well as the garlic into the recipe. Time to add in water to make a thickish batter. Do not get tempted to add in a lot of water at this stage. However, let me remind that Bajra flour is actually very dry. It doesn't have any gluten. It's a gluten-free flour. So even if the water is a little more, it's fine. You can just rest it for a little while and then go ahead. Also, if you have some buttermilk at home, instead of water and curd, you can make this batter using buttermilk. Simple. The batter is done and ready. Simultaneously, let's heat a tawa on high flame. And to this, let's add in vegetable oil. Well, since I said earlier, Bajra is a little dry as a flour, slightly more oil will do better in this recipe. Once the oil just kind of begins to heat up, I'm going to use a ladle and drop in the batter like so. While I'm making tinier pancake like Cheelas, you can make one large one and that's absolutely perfect. So that they look nice and crusted, I'm adding in some untoasted sesame seeds. They will automatically get toasted once we flip the Cheela. That's also actually how you decide whether the seeds have to be toasted or not. If the recipe calls for just serving directly, toasted or roasted or baked seeds work perfect. But if there's a recipe like this, which is going to get flipped, and then the baking of course will happen that way. So remember this. I'm going to take the same oil from the pan and add on top of the chilla like so. Let's flip the chilla very carefully. Our Bajra Cheelas are cooked on both sides. They're looking wonderful and crusted. Let's transfer these on a plate. And similarly, let's start making some more. With this, our Bajre ka Cheela are done and ready. Well, in Gujarat, they're also known as Bajrana Chamchamiya. Why Chamchamiya? Because they actually spoon it in the tawa with a chammach. As simple as you can get. Make this, serve this with a chutney or a ketchup. Have fun. On that note, this is me, the Bombay Chef Varun Inamdar, signing off. Bye for now.